And by contrast, we did Survey A and Survey B in our class, and for one, this shows how closely related the two surveys are, that people in our class, there was like such a minute difference because they understood what the Marxist terms meant. Survey A was 14.43 points, Survey B was 14.44 points, and myself, for instance, I didn't take this survey, but as I've been in the class, yeah, I see what's going on. I mean, I see how a lot of things have to do with where you start within the capitalist system, the whole idea of primitive accumulation, the whole idea that you're not really free, you're kind of free in the double sense if you're a worker, that you have free choice to join like a contract with a business person, but you also don't have any capital of your own, so you're kind of subjected to that. You don't really have a choice, so you're kind of a corporate slave in that sense. And for our class, a lot of people showed up for proletariat. Most people were SBS, obviously, because it's a political science class. As far as political party, a lot of people still put no party, or a lot of people put no party, which is interesting. I wonder if that might have a little bit to do with this class. Then there are also a lot of Democrats, Republicans, a couple other people like anarchists or independents. And interestingly enough, still the majority of the class decided that they weren't communist or they weren't Marxist. But still, there seems to be a much larger pool as people learn about Marxism, as they become more familiar, as they let down some of those presuppositions.
All right, we also, so now we'll get into the surveys and the observations and results of all this, now that you've been exposed to all the random raw data. What we discovered was that the lowest scoring individuals in both surveys were from the colleges that, once again, typically do not teach Marxist concepts. So this really supports the thesis and hypothesis that we had about the increase in knowledge of Marxist concepts, also increasing the individual score. What this really indicates when you apply Marxist analysis to this is that it indicates that those living the experience of the working class really do embody Marxist thought, which is what a lot of Marxist authors argue, which is something that we've really been focusing on in, once again, the political science class on Marxist theory that we're in. Based on party affiliation, socialists, thankfully, actually scored the highest. So we were glad that that was pretty accurate. The Greens and Democrats also scored higher than Republicans and the Independents. There was a really large number of individuals who chose not to identify with any party or to identify as independents, and that was something that was pretty interesting as far as really like political knowledge goes as well. So before we jump into conclusions, we also wanted to just briefly go over a few of the interesting observations that we found. For example, in our questions. So one of our questions was, do you feel animosity towards the rich? And something interesting that we saw was that, and this is very much, we felt typical of the United States, a lot of people said no, but they also had a clause in there as long as they worked for it. And so we thought this was really interesting just as an American view, that people tend not to have any more animosity towards people of an upper class or who are wealthy, but they want to make sure that they were the ones who worked for it. They had a much bigger problem with people who felt that they just like inherited the wealth, you know, family money. So that was an interesting thing that we found. Yeah, we got quite a few surveys that also mentioned Paris Hilton or celebrities and feeling animosity towards them, but in that same type of context.
Also, another thing we noticed was there's one question that's asked, do you feel alienated or do you feel like you can't be yourself at work? And a lot of people were like, no, because I found God or because of my religion. And Marx actually talks about this. He talks about religion kind of being flowers on the chain, that you're willing to accept your life in this world sucking totally because you figure, meh, I'm going to go to heaven after this, no worries, I can just deal with it now.
Yeah, we also had a question, this was from the Marxist terminology survey, that was, Marx describes alienation as the separation of the working self from the human self. Do you feel alienated? We got one answer that said, not so much anymore, but I do feel that work is continually pulling me away from my human self, and I pull back. And that's really interesting when you think about just the very individual feelings that we have towards these concepts, even though individuals don't always identify them as Marxist. In addition, there was another one that asked if people were exploited by their work from Political Survey A, and we got that yes, it was soul crushing, and that I think is once again really, it clearly indicates how overworked and alienated people are in their jobs. The fact that people feel like they're literally having their souls die because they're working so many hours or in such unfavorable conditions or not getting a high amount of pay really demonstrates that. Another very interesting question that we got was, does your personal life suffer as a result of your work? And we did have quite a few individuals who said no to this question, but one of the most interesting responses that I saw was an individual that said yes, because I had an anxiety attack because of my work, and that once again just shows, especially in the economic situation that we're in today, how stressful living in this type of system can be for individuals.
One other thing I wanted to mention, we also did get one survey in our question, which we talked about earlier, do you consider yourself a Marxist? How much do you know about Marxism? This person basically said that they didn't consider themselves a Marxist, they didn't really know much about it, but what they did know is that today they feel like people in the United States have consistently used the term communism as we use the term terrorist today, and it's elicited a lot of fear in people and a lot of hatred in people. And I just thought it was interesting to see somebody actually draw that conclusion, even though it wasn't even prompted, but just they felt like they wanted to give us that information.
Another thing that struck me was I have an economics class, so I passed the survey out in that class, and not a single person had a positive score in that class. And so it shows a couple things. For one, they've completely bought into the system, they don't want to change a single thing about the capitalist system. What was also interesting was most of those people identify themselves as middle class or upper class. So I'm kind of when I looked at it, I'm all like, man, these people are the man. And that's at NAU. I mean, there's nobody that's that amazingly independently wealthy at NAU, but there's still that concept that, oh, this is wonderful, maybe I own a small business or my family does, and there's no problems in life. So it really shows that they're class conscious in the opposite sense.
One other thing I wanted to mention was that on both surveys we asked if a revolution would be a good way to change society, and the answers were overwhelmingly no, but the ones that did say yes usually qualified that with as long as it's not violent. So there was a reluctance for a violent overthrow of the government in the United States.
Unless it was a part of our Marxist theory class.
Yeah.
Just about everyone in the Marxist theory class said a revolution is the only way to do it. One person, or the best way, one person answered the question of, is this the best way, by saying it's the only way. So.
Interestingly enough, that person was a Republican.
Yes. So we'll move on to the conclusions, but if anybody else wants to have questions about the types of responses that we got or want to see example surveys, we can have that happen in the Q&A period as well.